Hi, folks. So, I was just watching I think episode 9 of season 3 of Ginny and Georgia. I think it is. It's an interesting enough program with Georgia, the character, being a very interesting character to say the least. Yeah. But they have this concert at the end, and they have a song in the song saying, I'm a man, a man's man, and I've made all the decisions since the world began. Okay. But that's wrong. And it's women playing the men, and they're doing it from a feminist point of view. But it's just wrong. Men were not the decision makers. Never have been. Never have been. How do we know that men were never the decision makers? How do we know that? Who were the ones training the men? Who were the ones teaching the men? It was the mothers. And if you had leaders, kings and queens, well, kings especially, and princes, and you had the gentry, and you had male gentry, they would have been raised by a nanny. They would have been taught. If the male generation at the time were behaving in a way that was unacceptable to women at the time, oh, bet your bottom dollar, the ones raising the boys would have made bloody sure the boys knew that. Exactly as society has done now. Right? You think the past is wrong, so what do? You correct it. You make sure people know. It's always happened. Why is it that they think that this has only happened now? That they are such a wonderful generation? It's always happened. Always. Women have always been the ones who have decided the rules. Always women. Always. And the fact that women have been the ones deciding the rules, they didn't need votes for women. They didn't, because women were the ones who led their husbands. Because generally speaking, if their husband wants good food on the table, this is for most couples, this is. If he wants a wife to be pleasing in bed, to be pleasing in the kitchen, etc., 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 when he comes home from work, he has to bow down to her in certain ways, doesn't he? He has to. Societal changes were generally speaking pushed by women, not by men. They were pushed to men by women. So the politicians were men, yes, because women didn't want to do it. It was a horrible bloody job. Nobody wanted that stuffy job. To be in that sort of environment with men smoking cigars and in there with all old men, you know, talking about things that didn't matter, not really caring about people. Yeah, caring about politics because it made them look good. Yeah, generally speaking, women were like, no thank you, we don't want to be part of that. Even the women that have been involved in it more recently, a lot of them have decided very, very quickly to get out of it because they've realised what a horrible job it is. I mean, plus the amount of hours you're going to work. No one in their right mind wants to do that job. That's why people not in their right mind tend to do that job. You know, and women say no to that. They have for years. The only reason so many women have got involved now is because it's been pushed on women to do so. And it's been pushed on parties to have only women shortlists to make sure you've got a bigger representation of women. Right? But it was never the case that women were being overlooked for men. Never the case. Now, okay, you might find the incredibly... So, when I say never the case, I don't mean there wouldn't have been one case ever. I'm saying it's such a rare thing to have happened that it's not worth mentioning as an issue. Now, of course, those sort of things would happen occasionally. Everything happens occasionally. But it doesn't mean we should talk about it as if it's a generalised problem. Because it's not. So even with regards to business, in factories, not a lot of women end up being leaders with regards to top companies because not a lot of women wanted to start on the shop floor working in that factory in all the grease and the dirt and the crap and the heat. They didn't want to do that. Okay, then they couldn't start from the bottom and work their way up, could they? Not like a man could. Because if men were happy to do that, no, it's absolute nonsense. Women have always been in control. They always have. We have programs going back in the 60s where it's always a case where you've got the man moaning about the nagging wife. Why? Why? Because it was a thing. Why? Because the man knew he had to give in to the wife. Otherwise she'd serve him, dog poo on toast. Or the equivalent food-wise. For his lunch. She would forget to do the nice things that she does for him. Any intelligent man will bow down to that woman, right? Because he understands the power. Sex is a power that women have, and sex is something that men must have. Must have. So therefore, it's utter and total nonsense that men have always been in control. There's always been that illusion because all the positions that looked like they were in control were men. But behind that man was a woman. Behind that man was daughters and sisters and a wife who all were an influence on him and his decisions. As much as any man would have been. Because certainly, yes, if you were a man and you were in a family that was quite rich and powerful, but you had sisters, you were brought up with your sisters, right? You would learn from your sisters. You would learn from your nanny, who would have been 99.99999% female. Now, we can't say that every nanny was female because there may have been one male, maybe two men nannies in the history of nannyhood during those times. But it was predominantly women, so you can say pretty much, So, there are a lot of lies within society. A lot of common beliefs that are not true. And that's one. As I say, it's not a problem. The truth of it isn't a problem. It's not something that we need to sort out. We don't need to stop that being the case. We can't stop it. We can't stop women being in control, being the actual decision makers, as they always have been. We can't really stop that. We can understand it. from the point of the power that the women have and how they use that, how they use their influence compared to men. And that's okay. So that's not something we need to fix. What we do need to fix is stop telling lies. We need truth. And yes, I was watching a TV program where they had this in a school play. But we all know that this is the way that feminism views things. And they have done for a long time. And it's wrong. It's inaccurate. Very inaccurate. But the way that feminism works, they massively devalue women by saying that men were always in control, because how weak and pathetic were the women in the past. That's what they're saying. But the women in the past weren't. They were stronger than the women now. They had to be. Conditions. Most women now, women in their 50s, 60s, they have not lost a child. 300 years ago, 400 years ago, most women had experienced their children dying as infants. Don't you ever speak about the women then not being strong. Most women now have no understanding what strength is compared to the women then. The women that had 10, 15 kids and saw 10 of them die in infancy. How can you carry on with life? And yet they did. They carried on bearing children and watching those children die. It was what life was then. And they wouldn't have done that for a world that was absolutely and completely controlled by men. It wasn't. So, feminism. Wise up and be truthful about the women in the past. You take care. God bless. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.